Before we begin, tell me in the comments where are you watching from. I'd love to know how far our celestial stories reach. There are nights when the world holds its breath, when the boundary between what is known and what is possible grows thin as gossamer, when the ordinary transforms into the miraculous with no warning at all. It was on such a night that Catherine found him, broken and bleeding in the snow outside her mountain cabin, his body twisted in ways that spoke of a fall from an impossible height, his face beautiful beyond anything human, and his back torn where wings had once been. She had been living alone in the mountains for 3 years, ever since the accident that had taken her family. Her husband and young son, traveling home on icy roads, had never made it. The car had skidded, flipped, and when the silence finally came, Catherine's world had ended. She had fled to this remote place, high above the valley where ordinary life continued without her, seeking solitude not for healing, but for the right to grieve without witnesses, without well-meaning friends telling her that time would ease the pain, without strangers offering prayers she no longer believed could reach ears that had stopped listening. The cabin was small but sturdy, built by her grandfather decades ago, heated by a stone fireplace that crackled with perpetual warmth during the long winter months. She spent her days chopping wood, melting snow for water, reading books by lamplight, and trying not to think about the 2 graves in the valley cemetery that she could not bring herself to visit. She had grown accustomed to silence, to the absence of laughter, to the echo of footsteps that belonged only to her. But on this particular night, something had pulled her from sleep. Not a sound, but a feeling. A pressure in the air like the moment before lightning strikes, like the instant before a prayer is answered or denied. She had risen from her bed, wrapped a heavy shawl around her shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch, compelled by something she could not name. The snow was falling in thick, silent curtains, transforming the landscape into something otherworldly, something that belonged more to dream than reality. And there, collapsed at the edge of her property line, was a figure that should not have existed. A man, or something shaped like a man, lying face down in the snow, his body radiating heat that melted the ice around him into a perfect circle of bare earth. He wore clothing that seemed woven from light itself, now torn and stained with blood that glowed faintly silver in the darkness. Catherine approached slowly, her heart hammering, every rational part of her mind screaming that this was impossible, that she should go back inside, lock the door, pretend she had seen nothing. But another part of her, a part that had been silent since the day she lost everything, whispered that this moment mattered, that she stood at a crossroads, that her choice now would change everything. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch his shoulder. His skin was warm despite the freezing air, and the moment her fingers made contact, his eyes opened. They were the color of distant stars, silver and gold swirled together, ancient and sorrowful, holding within them the memory of skies she had never seen and could never reach. He tried to speak, but the words came out in a language she did not recognize, musical and strange, like wind through cathedral bells. Then he tried again, and this time the words were English, though his accent belonged to no place on earth. "Please," he whispered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Do not be afraid. I mean you no harm." Catherine looked at his back, at the ragged wounds where magnificent wings had clearly been torn away, at the blood that pooled beneath him, and made a decision that defied all logic, all caution, all self-preservation. "Can you walk?" He nodded, though the movement clearly caused him pain. Together, supporting each other like soldiers returning from a battle only they had witnessed, they made their way to the cabin. She helped him inside, guided him to the space in front of the fireplace, and eased him down onto the thick rug that covered the floor. The flames illuminated his face, and Catherine saw clearly what she had only glimpsed in the darkness. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to observe, as if beauty itself had taken form and substance, as if grace and sorrow had been given flesh and bone. She brought water, blankets, strips of clean cloth for bandages. He watched her with those impossible eyes, and she felt seen in a way she had not been seen in years, not since her husband used to look at her across their small kitchen table and know without words what she was feeling, what she needed, what she feared. "What are you?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am what you would call fallen," he said, each word carefully chosen, as if he was translating not just language, but entire concepts that had no earthly equivalent. "I broke the laws that govern my kind. I chose compassion over obedience. I saved a life I was not meant to save, and for this, I was cast down." Catherine cleaned his wounds with gentle hands, and as she worked, he told her his story. He spoke of the celestial realms, of hierarchies and orders, of beings of pure light serving purposes beyond human comprehension. He spoke of watching the mortal world from above, of seeing suffering and joy, birth and death, love and loss play out in endless cycles. He spoke of growing questions, of doubts that were forbidden, of a human child he had been ordered to allow to die, and his refusal to obey. "The child was meant to perish in a fire," he said, his voice heavy with memory. "It was written, decreed, part of the greater pattern. But when I looked at her face, when I heard her mother's prayers, I could not let it happen. I broke the rules. I intervened. I carried the child from the flames. And for this act of mercy, I was deemed unworthy of heaven." Catherine's hand stilled on the bandage she was wrapping. "They punished you for saving a child. They said I disrupted the divine plan," he replied. "They said I elevated my judgment above the infinite wisdom of creation. They said I chose attachment over duty. And perhaps they were right. Perhaps I was not meant to feel. But I did feel. I felt her terror, her mother's anguish, and I could not stand by and do nothing." "What was her name?" Catherine asked softly. "The child you saved." He looked at her with eyes that held galaxies. "Her name was Catherine. She was 3 years old. She had dark curls and eyes that reminded me of spring. That was 35 years ago." The bandage fell from Catherine's hands. Her breath caught in her throat. Memories rushed back, fragments she had always dismissed as dreams, as imagination, as the confusion of trauma. She remembered fire, remembered heat and smoke, remembered her mother's screams and her own terror. And she remembered arms of light, a presence that lifted her, carried her, spoke words of comfort in a language she could not understand, but that calmed her racing heart. "No," she whispered. But even as she spoke, she knew it was true. She remembered the burn scar on her left arm, barely visible now, that her mother had said was a miracle to have survived. She remembered the stories her mother used to tell before she died, about the angel who had defied heaven to save her daughter, about the divine intervention that should not have been possible. "You saved me," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life." He nodded slowly. "And now, by some design I cannot fathom, you save mine. Perhaps there is a pattern after all. Perhaps the universe conspires toward balance." Catherine worked through the night, tending his wounds, keeping the fire burning, offering him water and what little food she had. As dawn approached, he slipped into something between sleep and unconsciousness, his breathing shallow but steady, his body beginning the slow work of healing. She sat beside him, watching the firelight play across his features, trying to reconcile the impossible truth of what had happened with the practical reality of what she now faced. She had sheltered a fallen angel. The being who had saved her life decades ago now lay helpless in her home, cast out of heaven for the act of mercy that had allowed her to exist. The weight of it was staggering, the implications beyond anything she could fully process. But beneath the shock and confusion, she felt something else stirring. Purpose. For the first time since losing her family, she felt needed, felt that her continued existence mattered for something beyond simply enduring. The first day passed in quiet vigilance. She changed his bandages, kept him warm, and when he woke briefly, she offered him broth that he sipped gratefully, before sleep claimed him again. The wounds on his back were healing with supernatural speed, but she could see they would leave scars, permanent reminders of what had been torn away. On the second day, he was able to sit up, to speak with more strength, to begin the difficult work of adjusting to a body that no longer responded as it once had. He tried to stand and stumbled, his sense of balance completely altered by the absence of wings. Catherine caught him, and they both laughed, a startled sound in the quiet cabin. The first laughter either had experienced in longer than they could remember. "I do not know how to be mortal," he admitted as she helped him back to the rug. "I do not know how to be limited by flesh and bone. I do not know how to exist in a world where I can no longer fly." "Neither did I," Catherine said softly. "After the accident, after I lost them, I did not know how to exist in a world where they were gone. I still do not know most days. But we endure. We continue. We find small reasons to take the next breath, and then the one after that. If this story is touching your heart, please leave a like and subscribe. It truly helps me keep creating stories filled with light, love, and hope." He looked at her with new understanding. "You have known loss." "I have known nothing but loss," she replied. And then, for the first time since fleeing to this mountain sanctuary, she told her story. She spoke of her husband Marcus, who made her laugh even on the hardest days, who saw her completely and loved what he saw. She spoke of their son Daniel, who was 7 years old when he died, who loved dinosaurs and stars and asking questions that had no easy answers. She spoke of the phone call that shattered her world, of the funeral she barely remembered, of the crushing guilt that maybe if she had called them one more time, asked them to wait one more hour, the timing would have been different, and they would still be alive. The angel listened without interruption, and when she finished, he reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, human, no longer glowing with celestial light, but somehow more real for the absence of it. "You carry a burden that was never yours to bear," he said gently. "The accident was not your fault. You could not have prevented it. This is the cruelty of the mortal experience, that you blame yourselves for outcomes beyond your control, that you torture yourselves with 1,000 what-ifs that change nothing." "How can I not wonder?" Catherine asked, her voice breaking. "How can I not imagine all the ways it could have been different?" "Because wondering steals from you the only thing you truly have," he said. "This moment, this breath, this choice. You cannot change the past. You cannot control the future. You can only choose how you exist in this singular, sacred now." They sat in silence, hands joined, two beings who had lost everything, learning to exist in a world that felt hostile to their continued presence. Outside, snow continued to fall, and the mountains stood eternal and indifferent, and somewhere far above, realms they could not see continued their ancient rotations, concerned with patterns and purposes beyond mortal understanding. On the third day, everything changed. Catherine woke to a sound she had never heard before, a resonance that was not quite music and not quite language, but something that existed between the two. It came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the walls of the cabin, through her bones, through the very air itself. She sat up quickly, her heart racing, and saw that the angel was already awake, standing at the window with an expression of such profound emotion that she could not name it. Fear, hope, dread, and longing all mixed together into something that transcended simple human categories. "They have come," he whispered. "He has come." Catherine moved to his side and looked out the window. The world had transformed. The sky, which should have been the pale gray of winter morning, was instead filled with light, not the light of sun, but something more fundamental, more alive. It poured down in visible streams, golden and white, and every color that had no name, illuminating the snow until the landscape looked like it was made of diamonds and starlight. And descending through those rivers of luminescence was a figure of such radiant magnificence that Catherine had to shield her eyes, had to look away, and then force herself to look back, compelled by something deeper than fear. He was tall, impossibly tall, or perhaps height had no meaning when applied to him. His form was human-shaped, but composed of light so brilliant it seemed solid, substantial, more real than reality itself. Wings spread from his back, not the white feathered wings of paintings and sculptures, but wings made of pure illumination, of condensed starlight, of the substance of creation itself. His face was beautiful and terrible, loving and stern, holding within it the paradox of infinite mercy and absolute justice. "Michael," the fallen angel whispered beside her. "The King of Heaven, the sword of the divine. He has come for me." The cabin door opened without being touched, swung wide by will alone, and the radiant being entered. The small space should not have been able to contain him, but somehow it did, as if the laws of physics bent around his presence, as if reality adjusted itself to accommodate him. His gaze swept the room and landed first on the fallen angel, and the expression that crossed his luminous features was complex, beyond Catherine's ability to interpret. "Brother," Michael said, and his voice was like thunder that somehow did not hurt, like an avalanche that carried no threat, like the roar of the ocean contained within a whisper. "You have been judged and found wanting. You have been cast down for the sin of misplaced mercy. You have been stripped of your wings and your place in the celestial orders. And yet I find you here, sheltered and tended, healed by the very life you once saved in defiance of divine will." The fallen angel straightened, meeting Michael's gaze with quiet dignity, despite his diminished state. "I accept my punishment. I do not ask for forgiveness or restoration. I made my choice knowing the consequences, but I cannot regret it. I would make the same choice again." Michael's attention shifted to Catherine, and she felt the full weight of his regard, felt herself seen with a completeness that was almost unbearable. He saw not just her present self, but all her selves, across all her moments, every choice she had ever made, every secret she had ever kept, every hope and fear and dream laid bare before him. "Catherine Walsh," he said, and hearing her name spoken in that voice felt like being unmade and remade in the same instant. Saved from fire by an act of forbidden mercy. Widow and mother, bereaved and broken, hiding from life in this mountain sanctuary. "Do you know what you have done by offering shelter to the fallen?" Catherine wanted to speak, but her throat was closed, her voice lost. She could only shake her head. "You have completed a circle," Michael said. And now there was something almost gentle in his tone, something that reminded her that beneath the terrible majesty, this being was capable of love, was perhaps made of love, even if it was love of a kind she could barely comprehend. 35 years ago, he saved your life in defiance of the pattern we had decreed. In doing so, he believed he was choosing his heart over divine order. But what if divine order is larger than we understand? What if the pattern includes even our rebellions, our defiances, our acts of mercy that seem to break the rules? He moved closer, and now Catherine could see that his eyes held stars. Actual stars, swirling galaxies contained within his gaze. "You were saved so that you could be here, in this moment, to offer shelter when it was needed. He fell so that he could be here, in this moment, to receive it. And I am here, in this moment, not to punish but to reveal." Michael extended his hand, and light flowed from his palm, coalescing into images that hung in the air like windows into other times, other places. Catherine saw herself as a child, carried from flames by the angel who now stood beside her. She saw herself growing up, making choices, following paths that seemed random, but now revealed pattern. She saw herself meeting Marcus, falling in love, building a life. She saw Daniel being born, saw the joy and the ordinary magic of family life. And then she saw the accident, but from a different perspective. She saw the moment of impact, saw her husband and son's souls leaving their bodies, saw them caught and cradled by beings of light, saw them welcomed into realms of such beauty and peace that her heart ached with longing and relief all at once. She saw that they had not suffered, that the transition had been instant and gentle, that they were whole and happy and waiting for her with patience that knew no urgency, because in eternity, all reunions are inevitable. But more than that, she saw why. She saw the intricate web of cause and effect, saw how their deaths, tragic and terrible as they were, had set in motion events that would ripple across decades and dimensions. She saw herself retreating to this mountain, to this specific cabin, at this specific time. She saw the fallen angel's trial in the celestial courts, saw the moment of his casting down, saw the trajectory of his fall calculated with precision that ensured he would land exactly where Catherine would find him. Free will and destiny are not opposites, Michael said softly. They are dance partners. You choose, and your choices matter absolutely. And yet the pattern holds, adjusts, incorporates even your rebellions into its design. My brother thought he was breaking the rules when he saved you. He did not know he was fulfilling a deeper purpose, preparing for this moment, for this meeting, for this healing. He turned to the fallen angel. You did not fall because you disobeyed. You fell because your education in mortality required you to experience limitation, to understand from the inside what it means to be human, to be vulnerable, to be capable of death. You fell because your next assignment requires that you remember what it feels like to need mercy, so that when you offer it, you do so not from a place of distant benevolence, but from genuine understanding. The fallen angel looked stunned. Assignment? I am cast out. I am fallen. I have no assignment. You are transformed, Michael corrected. Falling and rising are not opposites. They are stages of growth. You fell so that you could rise differently, so that you could return not as you were, but as what you are meant to become. He gestured, and the wounds on the angel's back began to glow. Catherine watched in wonder as light gathered in those scars, as new wings began to form, but different from what had been torn away. These wings were made of something more substantial than pure light. They had form and texture, feathers that looked almost solid, roots that grew from the scars themselves. They were mortal wings, or something between mortal and divine, capable of flight, but marked by the memory of falling. You will return to heaven, Michael said, but not as an angel who has never questioned, never doubted, never chosen mercy over rules. You return as one who has lived among mortals, who has known their pain, who has experienced their kindness. You return as a bridge between worlds, and this will be your purpose, to stand at the threshold, to help others who struggle to reconcile divine will with human suffering. The fallen angel, no longer quite so fallen, looked at his new wings with wonder, and something like grief. And her? He asked, turning to Catherine. What of the woman who saved me as I once saved her? What is her purpose in this pattern? Michael's gaze returned to Catherine, and this time she met it without flinching, without looking away. She felt his love, vast and impersonal, and yet somehow intimately aware of every moment of her suffering, every night she had cried alone, every prayer she had stopped speaking because she believed no one was listening. Catherine Walsh, he said, you have been given a gift that few mortals receive. You have seen beyond the veil. You have witnessed the truth that death is not ending but transformation, that love survives all transitions, that the universe is not random but patterned with precision beyond your ability to perceive. What will you do with this knowledge? Catherine took a shaky breath. I do not know. I thought I wanted to hide from life, to grieve in isolation until I died, and could be with them again. But now I see that isolation is its own kind of death, that I have been choosing absence over presence, that I have been so focused on what I lost that I forgot what remains. And what remains? Michael asked gently. Life, Catherine whispered. This moment, this breath, the choice to keep going, not because the pain is gone, but because I honor them by continuing to engage with the world they no longer can. The choice to see that if their deaths could serve a purpose, could be woven into a pattern that allows fallen angels to be found and sheltered and healed, then perhaps my grief can also serve. Perhaps I can use it to help others who suffer. Perhaps I can become a bridge, too, between loss and hope, between grief and grace. Michael smiled, and the radiance of it filled the cabin with warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. Then you understand. Then you have completed your education as well. The pattern does not require your continued suffering. It only required your willingness to remain open, to offer compassion even in the midst of your own pain, to shelter the stranger who arrived broken at your door. He placed his hand on the angel's shoulder and his other hand on Catherine's head, and light flowed through them both, not changing them, but illuminating what was already there, bringing into visibility the truth that had always existed, but had been obscured by pain and doubt and fear. Brother, Michael said to the angel, you are called to return, but you will not return alone. You will carry with you the memory of these 3 days, of being mortal and vulnerable and dependent on the kindness of the one you saved. Let that memory shape your service. Let it make you gentle with those who struggle. Let it teach you that mercy is not weakness, but the highest expression of divine love. He turned to Catherine. And you, beloved daughter of earth, you are called to return as well. Not to heaven, not yet, but to life. Return to the valley. Find others who grieve. Sit with them in their darkness, not to fix them, but to remind them they are not alone. Share what you have seen. Not to convince or convert, but to offer hope that patterns exist beyond our perception, that love is stronger than death, that loss can be transformed into purpose if we are brave enough to remain open. The light that surrounded Michael began to intensify, and Catherine felt the boundaries of the cabin dissolving, felt herself standing not in her small mountain refuge, but at the edge of something vast and infinite. She saw the celestial realms in all their glory, saw hierarchies and orders, saw beings of pure light engaged in tasks beyond her comprehension. She saw her husband and son, radiant and whole, waving to her with joy, sending love that crossed dimensions and arrived in her heart like sunlight after endless winter. Not yet, Marcus called to her, his voice clear as bells, unchanged by death, still carrying the warmth she remembered. We will wait. We will be here when your time comes. But you have work to do first. Lives to touch. Purpose to fulfill. Live, Catherine. Live for us. Live for yourself. Live because life is the gift, and wasting it in grief honors no one. Daniel was beside him, no longer 7 but somehow ageless, grinning with the same mischievous joy she remembered. I am proud of you, Mom. I see what you did. You helped an angel. That is so cool. Now go help more people. Go be amazing like you always were. Catherine reached toward them, tears streaming down her face, but Michael gently lowered her hand. Not yet, he said with infinite kindness. Not yet, but someday. I promise you. Someday. The vision faded, and Catherine found herself back in her cabin, the morning light ordinary once more, the impossible radiance gone as if it had never been. The angel stood beside her, his new wings folded against his back, beautiful and strange, and marked by mortality in a way that made them more, rather than less, divine. I must go, he said softly. My time here is ended, but I will remember. Every moment of these 3 days, every kindness you showed, every conversation we shared, I will carry it with me, and it will make me better at what I am called to do. Will I see you again? Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. Perhaps, he said. "Perhaps not in this life. But we are connected now, woven into each other's stories. And in eternity, all connections are maintained. Nothing is truly lost. Nothing is truly ended. Everything transforms." He moved toward the door, and as he did, his form began to fade, becoming translucent, becoming light. He paused at the threshold and looked back at her with eyes that held both his ancient celestial nature and the new understanding of mortality he had gained. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me when I was broken, for offering shelter without condition, for reminding me that mercy is not just something we offer from a position of strength, but something we receive when we are most vulnerable. You saved me, Catherine, as I once saved you, and now we are both called to save others, each in our own way." And then he was gone, rising through the roof like it was made of mist, his wings catching light that came from no earthly source, ascending to realms she could not follow, but could finally believe in again. Catherine stood alone in her cabin, the fire burning low, the morning fully arrived, and felt the weight of 3 years of isolation beginning to lift. She looked around at the space that had been her sanctuary and her prison, saw it with new eyes. It had served its purpose. It had given her the solitude she needed to reach the bottom of her grief, to arrive at the place where she could be cracked open just enough to recognize truth when it appeared broken and bleeding in the snow outside her door. But she could not stay here. She had been given a gift, a vision, a purpose. And she had been given permission by the 2 souls she loved most to stop merely existing and begin living again. Catherine began to pack. Not everything, but enough. Clothes, a few books, the photographs she had not been able to look at for 3 years, but could now regard with pain that felt like love, rather than destruction. She would return to the valley. She would find a small house, nothing elaborate, just space enough for herself and for the people she would invite in. She would seek out the grieving, the lost, the ones sitting alone in their own dark nights, wondering if anyone understood their pain. She would offer what she had been given: presence, compassion, and the hard-won knowledge that patterns exist beyond our perception, that death is transformation rather than ending, that love survives all transitions. It would not be easy. Some days would be harder than others. She would still miss Marcus and Daniel with an ache that would never fully disappear. But missing them and honoring them were not the same as hiding from life. She could grieve and still engage. She could carry her loss and still offer comfort. She could be broken and still be useful. The thought made her smile, a tentative expression that felt foreign on her face after so long, but also somehow right. She was broken. She would always be broken. But broken could still be beautiful. Broken could still be strong. Broken could still serve. She took one last look at the cabin that had sheltered her during the darkest period of her life, whispered a thank you to the walls that had held her together when she felt like falling apart, and stepped outside into snow that sparkled with ordinary morning light. The sky was clear, pale blue and infinite, holding no trace of the celestial visitation except in her memory, in her heart, in the absolute certainty that what she had experienced was real, even if no one would believe her. Catherine began walking down the mountain path, her footsteps crunching in the snow, her breath visible in the cold air, her heart beating with purpose it had not held in years. Behind her, the cabin stood silent and waiting, ready for the next soul who would need its shelter. Ahead of her, the valley spread out, full of people living and dying, loving and losing, struggling and surviving. Somewhere in that valley, there were those who needed what she could offer. She would find them. Or perhaps, guided by the same pattern that had brought a fallen angel to her door, they would find her. Thank you for listening till the end. Share what moved you most in the comments, and don't forget to follow and subscribe. If you're new here, welcome to our family of celestial souls. The months that followed were a time of gentle unfolding. Catherine found a small house on the edge of town, close enough to be part of the community, but far enough to maintain the quiet she still needed. She started attending a grief support group, not just to receive comfort, but to offer it, to sit with others in their pain and say without words that she understood, that she had been there, that survival was possible, even when it felt impossible. A young widow named Sarah began visiting Catherine's house on Tuesday afternoons, bringing her infant daughter and her unbearable sadness. Catherine would make tea and hold the baby while Sarah cried, offering no platitudes or false promises, just presence and the knowledge that someone else had walked this path and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but alive. An elderly man named Robert, who had lost his wife of 60 years, found his way to Catherine's door after hearing about her from a mutual acquaintance. He would sit in her small garden, pruning roses and talking about his beloved Margaret, about the life they had built together, about the terrifying emptiness of a house that had once been full of her presence. Catherine would listen and occasionally share her own stories, and slowly, they both began to understand that remembering was not betraying, that speaking of the dead kept them alive in a way that silence never could. A teenage girl named Emma, whose best friend had died by suicide, came to Catherine in desperate confusion, unable to reconcile her grief with her anger, her love with her sense of abandonment. Catherine sat with her through the rage and the tears and the guilt, helping her understand that all these feelings could exist simultaneously, that she did not have to choose between loving her friend and being angry at her choice, that healing was not linear, but a spiral that would bring her back to the same pain again and again, but at different levels of understanding. One by one they came. The grieving and the lost, and the ones who felt rejected by heaven because their prayers had not been answered in the ways they had hoped. Catherine welcomed them all, offered tea and tissues, and the most precious gift of all, her complete attention. She did not try to fix them or save them or convince them of anything. She simply sat with them in their darkness and let them know they were not alone. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between visitors, Catherine would feel a presence that reminded her of those 3 days, of the angel she had sheltered, of the celestial king who had revealed patterns she could not have seen on her own. She would look up at the sky and wonder if he was watching, if he remembered the mortal woman who had offered him shelter, if his new purpose was unfolding as her own was. Years passed. Catherine's hair turned gray. Her face bore the marks of a life fully lived. Her hands became wrinkled and spotted, but no less gentle in their touch. She became known in the community as a woman of great compassion, someone who had survived unbearable loss and chosen to transform it into service. People whispered that there was something special about her, something that made them feel safe in her presence, something that suggested she knew secrets about life and death that others could only guess at. On a winter evening much like the one when she had found the fallen angel, Catherine sat by her fireplace reading a letter that had just arrived. It was from Sarah, the young widow who had once been so broken she could barely function. The letter spoke of healing, of her daughter's 3rd birthday, of finding unexpected joy in small moments, of beginning to date again and feeling only slightly guilty about it. She thanked Catherine for being there during the darkest time, for showing her that survival was possible, for modeling a way to honor the dead while still engaging with the living. Catherine smiled and placed the letter in a box where she kept all such correspondence, a collection of testimonies to the ripple effect of choosing presence over isolation, of allowing her broken places to become the very cracks through which light could reach others. She thought about Marcus and Daniel, wondered what they would think of the life she had built from the ruins of her grief, and felt certain they would be proud. A soft knock on her door interrupted her reverie. She rose to answer it, wondering who would be visiting so late, and found a young man standing on her porch. He was perhaps 25, with kind eyes and an expression that mixed nervousness with determination, but it was his companion who made Catherine's breath catch. Beside the young man stood a woman with luminous eyes, an otherworldly grace, and a presence that suggested she belonged to more than one realm simultaneously. "Mrs. Walsh?" the young man said hesitantly. "My name is Thomas. This is Seraphina. We were told by someone we trust that you might be able to help us. We have questions about destiny and purpose, about visions we have been having, about the feeling that we are meant to do something important, but do not know what. We were told you understand these things in ways others do not." Catherine looked at Serafina and saw the slight shimmer around her form, the way reality bent subtly in her presence, the unmistakable signs of someone who walked between worlds. She recognized what was happening. The pattern was continuing. The work was expanding. She was being entrusted with others who stood at thresholds, who needed guidance from someone who had been where they were, who had seen beyond the veil and lived to remember it. "Come in," Catherine said warmly, stepping aside to welcome them into her home, into her heart, into the sacred work of helping souls recognize their purpose and embrace their calling. "Come in and tell me everything. We have much to discuss, and the night is still young." As she closed the door behind them and led them to the fireplace that had witnessed so much transformation, Catherine felt the familiar presence of divine attention, of being watched by benevolent forces that guided without controlling, that shaped without forcing. She thought of the angel she had sheltered, now serving in his transformed capacity in the celestial realms. She thought of her husband and son, waiting patiently in dimensions she would someday reach. She thought of Michael, the King of Heaven, who had revealed that mercy and justice were not opposites, but partners in the great dance of existence. And she understood, with clarity that came from years of walking the path between grief and grace, that this was her purpose. Not to have avoided suffering, but to transform it. Not to have prevented loss, but to honor it by helping others navigate their own. Not to ascend to heaven prematurely, but to create small sanctuaries of heaven here on earth, one conversation at a time, one moment of genuine presence at a time, one act of compassion that asked nothing in return. The fire crackled warmly as she settled into her chair, as Thomas and Serafina sat on the couch across from her, as the night deepened around them and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Catherine looked at their young, earnest faces and saw herself reflected there, saw the questions she had once carried, saw the longing for understanding that transcends easy answers. "Before we begin," she said gently, pouring tea into delicate cups that had once belonged to her mother, "I want you to know that I do not have all the answers. I can only share what I have learned, what I have seen, what I have come to understand through living and losing and choosing to remain open to mystery. Is that enough?" Thomas nodded eagerly. "More than enough. We just need someone who believes us, who does not think we are crazy for seeing what we see, for feeling what we feel." Serafina's luminous eyes met Catherine's, and in that gaze, Catherine saw recognition, saw that this woman knew exactly what Catherine was, what she had experienced, what she carried. "You sheltered one of us," Serafina said softly. "Years ago. He told us about you before he took his new assignment. He said you saved him not with power or magic, but with simple human kindness, with tea and bandages and a warm fire, with presence when he needed it most." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "He remembers. He will never forget," Serafina said. "None of us forget those moments when we are seen completely, when we are offered grace without condition. Your kindness changed him. It changed how he serves. And through him, it has changed how we all understand our relationship with humanity. You taught us something essential, that strength is not the opposite of vulnerability, that giving help and receiving it are equally sacred, that the divine and the mortal need each other in ways we are only beginning to comprehend." Thomas looked between them with growing understanding. "You are one of them, aren't you?" he asked Serafina. "One of the celestial beings. That is why I could see your light, why I have been dreaming of you for months before we met." "I am between," Serafina said carefully. "I am in transition, learning to walk in human form while maintaining connection to my original nature. And you, Thomas, you are called to walk with me, to help me understand humanity from the inside, to be my anchor to this world as I learn to serve in a new way. Why me? Thomas asked, the question that every human who encounters the divine must ask. I am nobody special. I am just a teacher, just someone trying to live a decent life. Why would heaven choose me? Catherine leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of experience and certainty. Because decent is special. Because ordinary kindness is the rarest and most precious commodity in any world. Because you do not need to be extraordinary to be essential to the pattern. The universe does not require heroes. It requires people willing to show up, to be present, to offer what they can with no guarantee of reward or recognition. She told them her story then, the whole story, leaving nothing out. She spoke of the fire she survived as a child, of the angel who saved her and was cast down for it. She spoke of her marriage and her son, of the accident that shattered her world, of the 3 years she spent hiding in a mountain cabin. She spoke of the night she found the fallen angel in the snow, of the 3 days she tended him, of Michael's visitation and the revelation of patterns she could not have imagined. She spoke of the slow healing that followed, of the work she had taken up, of the grieving souls she had helped navigate their own darkness. Thomas and Serafina listened without interruption, and when Catherine finished, the room was silent, except for the crackling fire and the soft sound of breathing. Outside, snow had begun to fall, gentle and unhurried, covering the world in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. So what do I do? Thomas asked finally. If I am called to walk with Serafina to help her understand humanity, what does that actually look like in practical terms? You live, Catherine said simply. You continue teaching your students, cooking your meals, walking your dog, reading your books. But you do it with her present, with her observing, with her learning from your example what it means to be mortal. You introduce her to your friends, your family, your routines. You let her experience joy and disappointment, success and failure, connection and loneliness. You show her that the human experience is not one grand dramatic arc, but thousands of small moments strung together, most of them ordinary, all of them sacred. And when people ask who she is, Thomas pressed, you tell them she is a friend from far away, learning about your culture, Catherine said with a slight smile. It is not even a lie. She is from very far away indeed, and she is learning. The details do not matter. What matters is that you help her understand why humanity is worth saving, worth serving, worth the attention of heaven. Serafina spoke then, her voice like music heard from a great distance. I came here by choice, as your angel once fell by choice. But my descent is temporary, a mission rather than punishment. I am to walk among humans for 1 mortal year, to experience your seasons and celebrations, your sorrows and joys, your births and deaths. At the end of that year, I return and report what I have learned. My testimony will influence decisions made in the celestial councils, will shape how my kind interacts with yours for generations to come. The weight of it terrifies me. Good, Catherine said firmly. Fear means you understand the responsibility. Fear means you will take it seriously. But do not let fear paralyze you. You learn by doing, by making mistakes, by stumbling and recovering. That is what mortality teaches us. That perfection is not the goal. Growth is the goal. Connection is the goal. Learning to love despite knowing that everything we love will eventually be lost. That is the goal. They talked late into the night, these 3 souls connected by invisible threads woven by forces beyond their control or understanding. Catherine shared practical advice about navigating human society, about the unwritten rules and social graces that would help Serafina blend in. Thomas asked questions about his own role, about boundaries and expectations, about how to balance his ordinary life with this extraordinary responsibility. Serafina listened and absorbed, occasionally asking clarifications that revealed just how different her perspective was from human understanding. When they finally rose to leave, the snow had stopped, and the world outside was silent and pristine. Thomas shook Catherine's hand warmly, thanking her for her wisdom and her willingness to help. Serafina embraced her, and in that embrace, Catherine felt a spark of celestial energy pass between them, a blessing and a promise. "He asks about you," Serafina whispered, "the one you sheltered. He serves now as a guide for souls in transition, helping them understand that death is transformation. He carries your tea and your kindness with him always, uses them as examples of what humanity can be at its best. He wants you to know that you were his teacher in ways the celestial realms could never be. He wants you to know he is grateful." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Tell him I am grateful too. Tell him that those 3 days gave me back my purpose, gave me a reason to return to life. Tell him that we saved each other, which is perhaps how it always works. We are all both teachers and students, both healers and wounded, both strong and vulnerable depending on the moment." After they left, Catherine stood at her window watching them walk down the snow-covered street, Thomas's arm protectively around Serafina's shoulders, her ethereal form casting unusual shadows in the streetlight. She thought about patterns and purposes, about how one small act of kindness 3 decades ago had set in motion a cascade of events that was still unfolding, still creating ripples across multiple dimensions. She thought about her husband and son, about the love that had not ended but transformed, about the family she had lost and the larger family she had gained. She thought about all the grieving souls who had passed through her door, all the conversations that had helped heal both speaker and listener, all the moments of genuine connection that proved the universe was not random but intricately designed, even when the design was too vast for mortal minds to fully comprehend. The years continued their gentle progression. Catherine grew older, her steps slower but her spirit no less vigorous, her mind sharp, and her heart still open to the broken and the lost who sought her counsel. She watched Thomas and Serafina's journey unfold, saw them navigate the complexities of a celestial being learning humanity, and a human learning to see the divine in everyday moments. She attended their wedding when Serafina chose to extend her stay, to fully embrace mortal form, to commit to living a human life with all its limitations and possibilities. She was there when they had their first child, a daughter who carried in her eyes a hint of her mother's celestial origin, who would grow up walking between worlds in ways that would eventually draw her to Catherine's door with questions only someone who had lived this path could answer. The pattern continued, expanding, creating new connections, weaving more souls into the tapestry. On a spring morning many years after that snowy night, when she had first found the fallen angel, Catherine woke with the certain knowledge that her time was drawing to a close. It was not a frightening knowing, but a peaceful one, a sense of completion rather than ending. She had done what she came to do. She had transformed her grief into grace, her loss into service, her brokenness into beauty. She had helped countless souls navigate their own darkness, had shown them by example that survival was possible, that love transcended death, that patterns existed even when they could not be seen. She dressed carefully, made herself tea, and sat in her favorite chair by the window, watching the spring rain fall softly on her garden. The flowers she had planted years ago were blooming, their colors vibrant against the gray sky, their beauty made more precious by its temporary nature. Everything bloomed and faded, was born and died, arrived and departed. That was the nature of mortal existence. And it was beautiful precisely because it was temporary, because it mattered precisely because it did not last forever. As the afternoon light began to soften, Catherine felt a familiar presence. She looked up and saw him standing in her living room, more solid than he had been during Michael's visitation, but still carrying an otherworldly quality that marked him as belonging to more than one realm. The angel she had sheltered, transformed and restored, now serving his purpose with wisdom, earned through suffering. "You came." she said softly, unsurprised. Somehow she had known he would be here for this transition, would offer her the same gentle care she had once offered him. "I came to thank you," he said, kneeling beside her chair, taking her aged hand in his. "And to help you cross over if you will permit me. It is part of my assignment now, to guide souls in their transition, to help them understand that death is not ending but homecoming. And you, who showed me such kindness when I was broken, you deserve the gentlest passage possible." Catherine smiled, feeling the weight of years beginning to lift, feeling her spirit preparing for flight. "Will it hurt?" "No more than falling asleep," he promised. "Less even. You will feel yourself becoming lighter, will sense the boundaries of your body becoming less solid. And then you will simply step out of it, the way you might step out of a coat that no longer fits, that has served its purpose, but is no longer needed. And then you will see them," he said gently. "Marcus and Daniel, waiting for you as they have always been waiting. They will welcome you home with such joy. And you will understand completely what you only glimpsed before, that time in the celestial realms works differently, that what felt to you like decades of separation was for them only a moment, that they have been holding space for your return, with patience that knows no suffering, because it knows the reunion is inevitable." Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were tears of relief, of anticipation, of completion. "I am ready," she whispered. "I am so ready." "I know," he said. "Your work here is done. You have served beautifully. You have transformed your pain into purpose, your loss into love that reached hundreds of souls. You have been a bridge between worlds, showing mortals that heaven is not distant, and showing celestials that humanity is worth every bit of attention we give it. You have taught by example that ordinary kindness is the most extraordinary force in any universe." He placed his hand over her heart, and warmth spread through her chest, gentle and soothing. Her breathing slowed, became easier, lost its labored quality. The pain she had carried for so long, the ache of missing her beloveds, began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace so profound it felt like finally coming home after the longest journey. "Thank you," she said, her voice growing faint, "for saving me all those years ago, for starting this whole pattern into motion, for coming back now to help me finish it." "Thank you," he replied, his eyes bright with unshed tears, "for showing me that falling was not punishment, but transformation, that being broken is not the same as being destroyed, that receiving help is as sacred as giving it. You taught me to be a better servant of the divine by teaching me what it means to be human. That gift is beyond measure." Catherine's eyes closed, and her breathing slowed further, and in the space between one breath and the next, she felt herself becoming lighter, less dense, less bound by the physical form she had inhabited for so many years. She sensed herself rising, floating, moving toward a light that was somehow familiar, that felt like recognition, that called to her with voices she knew better than her own. And then she was standing, no longer old and tired but vital and whole, in a place that was not quite place, and a time that was not quite time. And there, running toward her with arms outstretched and joy written across their faces, were Marcus and Daniel, exactly as she remembered them, but also more, brighter, filled with a vitality that mortal life could never quite contain. "You are here!" Daniel cried, crashing into her with the enthusiasm of eternal childhood. "You are finally here. We have been watching you, Mom. We saw everything you did. We are so proud of you." Marcus wrapped his arms around both of them, his embrace strong and sure and infinitely tender. "My beloved," he whispered against her hair. "My beautiful, strong, incredible wife. You did it. You took the worst thing that ever happened and transformed it into light. You helped so many people. You honored us by living fully, by choosing love even when love meant pain. I have missed you every moment, but I would not have wanted you to come sooner. Your work was too important." Catherine wept and laughed simultaneously, holding them both, marveling at the reality of their presence, at the solid warmth of them, at the fact that death had not taken them away, but only moved them to a different room in the vast house of existence. "I tried," she said. "I tried to make your deaths mean something, to let them change me in ways that could help others." "You did more than try," Marcus said. "You succeeded beyond anything we could have imagined. And now your work there is done, and your work here begins. There are others who need what you learned, souls transitioning who need someone who understands both mortality and eternity, who can bridge the gap between what was and what is becoming." The angel who had guided her transition stood at a respectful distance, watching the reunion with a smile of deep satisfaction. Catherine caught his eye and mouthed a final thank you, and he bowed slightly in acknowledgement before fading back toward the realms where his own work continued. She turned her full attention to her beloveds, to the family she had missed with every fiber of her being, and let herself fully arrive in this new existence. There would be time to understand how things worked here, time to explore the vast dimensions of eternity, time to begin whatever new purpose awaited her. But for now, in this moment, there was only reunion, only love, only the profound joy of finding what had been lost and discovering it had never truly been lost at all, only transformed, only moved to a different frequency that she could now perceive clearly. In the house she had left behind, her body sat peacefully in the chair by the window, a gentle smile on her lips, her hand still holding the teacup that had gone cold hours ago. Thomas and Serafina would find her when they came for their weekly visit, would recognize immediately what had happened, would weep for their loss while celebrating her transition. They would arrange a simple funeral, would gather all the souls she had helped over the years, would share stories of her kindness and wisdom, would recognize that her influence would continue long after her physical departure. And on certain quiet evenings, when someone sat alone grieving, when someone struggled with loss that felt unbearable, when someone questioned whether their pain had any purpose at all, they might feel a presence, a warmth, a sense of being seen and understood. They might dismiss it as imagination, as wishful thinking, as the mind's way of comforting itself. But some would recognize it for what it was: Catherine's continued service, her ongoing work of bridging the gap between grief and grace, her eternal purpose of reminding souls in darkness that light still exists, that patterns hold even when they cannot be seen, that love is the one force that truly survives all transitions, all transformations, all the deaths and rebirths that make up the grand journey of existence. The fire in her abandoned house eventually burned down to embers and then to ash, but the warmth it had provided, the healing conversations it had witnessed, the sacred work it had sheltered, all of that remained, woven into the fabric of reality itself, continuing to ripple outward in waves that would touch shores she could never have imagined, helping souls she would never meet, proving again and again that one life lived with purpose, one heart broken open and transformed into compassion, one woman willing to shelter the fallen and be sheltered in return, could change the pattern of existence itself in ways both subtle and profound. And somewhere in the celestial realms, Michael, the King of Heaven, watched it all unfold with satisfaction, with love, with the deep knowing that every fall serves a purpose, every loss creates space for new growth, every act of mercy, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, sends ripples across dimensions that eventually return as waves of grace, completing circles that span lifetimes, connecting souls across vast distances, proving that the universe is not random, but intricately, lovingly, impossibly designed to teach us all the lessons we most need to learn, that we are never alone, never abandoned, never beyond the reach of love, and that heaven is not a place we go but a state of being. We create with every choice to see the divine in each other, to offer kindness without condition, to remain open to mystery even when mystery breaks our hearts. Because in the breaking, we become capable of holding more light, more love, more of the infinite compassion that is the true substance of all creation. The story that began with a woman sheltering a fallen angel by her fire ended with that same woman ascending to new purpose, new service, new ways of bridging worlds, and helping souls remember their true nature. But endings are never truly endings, only transitions, only transformations, only the closing of one chapter and the opening of another in the vast, eternal story that includes us all, connects us all, and calls us all toward the same ultimate destination. Home, where we are known completely, loved absolutely, and welcomed with joy that transcends all the suffering it took to arrive, making every moment of the journey, no matter how painful, worth it for the grace of finally, fully, eternally belonging.